district. I ran in 2002. I was a Republican nominee against David Wu. I didn't win.
Unfortunately bad.
You know, people sometimes wonder why you don't see a lot of courage, political courage. And to illustrate this, the reason for that, I don't know if you've heard the story about the cowboy who dies, and he's at the gates of heaven, and St. Peter says, do you want to get into heaven? Can you tell me something you've done in your life that's really good? And he says, well, I came across a motorcycle gang that was brutally raping a woman. And I didn't hesitate. I walked right up to the leader and I gave a karate chop to the throat, and I punched him in the stomach, knocked him down. I turned to the rest of them and I said, you guys back off or I'm going to kick the you-know-what out of every one of you. And St. Peter says, well, that was very courageous. When did this happen? He says, right before I came here. So there is a price to pay. There's a price to pay for courage. I've been criticized recently by some Republicans because they feel that I've been unduly critical of the front runner in this race, Rob Cornelius. And you know, I promised Rob I'm not going to do any personal attacks. The very beginning I said no personal attacks, but I do feel it's okay to talk about issues and where you differ from the other candidates. Isn't that what politics is about? So I have a couple of questions for you, just to gauge with the sentiments of this audience. How many of you feel that Obamacare is a good law? Anybody? How many think that Obamacare should be repealed? Everybody? Okay.
You can't vote twice.
How about taxes? How many feel that we should balance the budget by raising taxes? Nobody? Would any of you want to vote for a candidate who doesn't think Obamacare should be repealed? Anybody would vote for a candidate who felt that way? How about taxes? Would any of you vote for a candidate who thinks that the way to balance the budget is to raise taxes? Anybody? Okay. So the reason I'm asking you these questions, in case you're suspecting my ulterior motive, is that Rob Cornelius has refused to sign the Club for Growth pledge to repeal Obamacare. And I asked him about this at a candidate forum. I said, Rob, why won't you sign the pledge? Will you vote to repeal Obamacare? He said, no, I won't vote to repeal Obamacare. I think it needs to be improved. Now, to me, trying to improve Obamacare is like putting perfume on a skunk. You know, you got a skunk living in your house. You can say, well, I'll deal with the situation. I'll put perfume on him. No, you got to get him out of your house. I don't think Obamacare can be improved. On taxes, Rob has refused to sign the No New Tax Pledge, which is put out by Americans for Tax Reform. Put this in perspective. 278 Republicans in Congress have signed the pledge not to raise taxes. Only 6 Republicans in the House refused to sign the pledge. So if Rob's elected, he'll be the 7th. Now, I have signed both pledges. I've signed the pledge to repeal Obamacare, and I've signed the pledge not to raise taxes. So, you know, I feel like, I don't know why, it's a few establishment Republicans who are backing Rob Cornelius who feel I shouldn't be criticizing him on these issues. And I said, well, if he would tell the voters where he stands on those issues, I wouldn't have to. I'd rather talk about myself. It's my favorite topic. I'm only talking about where he stands because he doesn't want Republican voters to know, because he knows the vast majority of Republican voters don't agree with him. He's trying to position himself in the center for the general election. I don't position myself. I just tell people what I think. And I've been advocating constitutional limited government, balanced budgets, low taxes, publicly for more than 20 years. And I started doing radio in the early 90s. I've been consistently on, before anybody heard of the Tea Party, that's where I stood on these issues, and I have a public record of it. Did you have a question?
No, I'm the timekeeper.
Oh, okay.
Keep
Are
track
you
of time.
saying
You got a minute.
I'm running out of time. Okay.
No, he's good.
So you can't, the thing is, you can't balance the budget by raising taxes. You can't, because you could raise the taxes all you want, but it won't balance the budget, because when you raise taxes, people just find other ways not to pay them. and the revenue to the government never goes up. Whenever they've tried raising taxes, the revenues don't go up. So, oh, Obama says, well, we're just going to raise taxes on rich people. Isn't that amazing that 99% of the people think we should raise taxes on the other 1%? I don't hear anybody say, I want to raise my tax, except for Warren Buffett, but I won't get into that. He doesn't really want to raise his own taxes either. So you can't fix the problem by raising taxes, because it's not a lack of tax problem, it's an excessive spending problem. Government, we all know this, government spending is completely out of control, and the only way to stop it is to get people in Congress who are totally committed, to balancing the budget by dramatically cutting spending. And I'm willing to do what needs to be done, which means getting rid of entire agencies and departments of the federal government, because frankly, I think I could live without all those departments anyway. You know, I don't need a Commerce Department to help me. I don't need a Department of Health and Human Services or a Labor Department. I don't need any of those departments. I think most of you probably feel the same way. Okay, so any questions?
Just answer my first question.
Yeah.
Second question, what about the Federal Reserve?
I want to abolish it. I filled out a questionnaire. You know, we get a lot of questionnaires at counties. Do you want to audit the Federal Reserve? And I wrote, yes, and then I want to abolish it. You see, I feel that where our country started getting off track was 100 years ago. You know, it's not just Obama. This has been a progression that's been going on for many, many decades of more and more bureaucracy, more and more spending, bigger and bigger government. The government now spends 25% of GDP, which is the highest level in history. And when did it start? The government was very small for our first 150 years, and then they made 2 reforms. It was working so well, it became the most wealthiest, powerful nation in the world during that period. And it was working so well, our economy was growing so fast, we were creating an enormous amount of wealth. And so they said, well, it's working so well, let's fix it. So they created the Federal Reserve and the income tax. And those were the infrastructures that created the basis for the modern mega-state and the huge bureaucracy that we all have to live under today. So I say you've got to go back to the root causes and deal with those problems, or we'll never fix this problem. That's a longer answer than I should give you. Yeah, let me.
After you repealed the Federal Reserve Act, would you advocate for a gold standard?
Yeah, and bear in mind, you know, the Federal Reserve, when its mission, you know what the Federal Reserve's mission was when it was created? To create a stable dollar. That's worked out pretty well, huh? The dollar's lost 96% of its value since the Federal Reserve was created, and it was stable before that. The dollar was totally stable. We didn't have any inflation. We didn't lose any of the purchasing power of the dollar. Then they created the Fed, and now a dollar will buy what 4 cents would buy in 1915. So they've been just as successful at stabilizing the dollar as the Energy Department has been in creating energy independence. Yeah.
What have you learned about United Agenda 21 and its translation into smart growth and sustainable communities?
I'll tell you, I'm only tangentially familiar with it. I understand that it's trying to promote an environmental agenda in the world, including the United States. I don't really know the details, but it doesn't sound like a great idea from what I know about it.
The key words are eliminate national sovereignty, abolish private property, move people in high-density cities, easier to define.
Well, we've got to fight against this kind of stuff.
I hope you look deeper into it.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Can you speak to state federal forest land? That's kind of an important issue in our county. We have a huge problem, I would have to say, with the federal government and its forest lands, not just in our county, but also.
Yeah, and I won't pretend to be an expert on it, but I'll tell you my feeling about it is that what we need to do is to bring the logging industry back to life. And a fundamental part of that is going to have to do with housing. Now, I realize it's not directly on topic, but to bring logging back, we have to bring housing back to life. And what a lot of people don't know, I happen to know a lot about this because I invest in real estate for a living. And what people don't know, everybody knows that banks aren't lending. You know, if you try to buy a home, it's very hard to get a bank loan. And if you're in my business, it's impossible to get a bank loan. So, but what people don't know is why the banks aren't lending. Everybody thinks, oh, these banks, you know, they're just hoarding the money. Well, banks want to lend money. You know, it's like supermarkets, they want to sell food. Banks lend money, that's what they do for a living. So why aren't they doing it? Well, I've asked every banker, every time I've gotten turned down for a loan, which has been a lot of times the last few years, I say, how come? Where are these rules coming from that make you not allowed to lend to somebody like me? Because I'm, I got a good credit score, I'm a good risk, right? It's all from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. That's where the rules come from. 90% of the mortgage market's controlled by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and they won't let the banks loan. And who owns Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac? Obama. So you have to get the government's foot off the throat of the banks so they can start lending again. The housing industry can come back, then logging can come back, but this time we have to let them log. It's crazy to not let them log. Environmental concerns, okay, fine, but it has to be reasonable. You have to balance it against economic. Logging used to be the biggest industry in Oregon. We could start, logging and exporting and building homes, yeah.
Well, let's stick on the logging because this is something I know a little bit about. I'm from Southern Oregon, so I have a little bit of a different perspective than what you have. That's nice and all that you want to get the housing industry back on track, but when you're continually shipping raw logs to China,
yeah,
which is what's happening now. You look at the price of timber, it's higher as it's ever been in the last 10 years because those raw logs are going to China. Now, one congressman in the state has introduced legislation to stop that. It hasn't happened in 30 years since the collapse of the log industry in the 80s, and especially in Southern Oregon. Now, your district has got a good chunk of forest in it.
yeah.
And you said you're not that well versed on it. That's a little disturbing, considering you're in a rural environment. You don't understand the issues. Because just having a booming housing industry, the only thing we do is import Canadian lumber, is what we did the last time around. You got federal courts tying us up, so how are you going to get it through the courts, and how are you going to get it through the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals?
You're not
going to have it.
No, your criticism is valid, and I'm a lousy politician. I don't pretend to know stuff when I don't know it. And your criticism is valid. I take it to
Well, I
heart.
criticize. I'm just saying you need to be a little more well versed on that if you're going to go to Columbia County.
You're right. My only
have this
excuse, if you
discussion.
want to take this as an excuse, is this was a special election. I didn't know I was running until the day before I signed up to run because, it's not like a normal election. You have months and months to prepare, and you can spend months, educating yourself on all the issues.
So you ran in
This happened so
2002,
fast.
right?
Yeah, but that was 10 years ago. But, you're probably not going to like my answer on this either. I'm basically a free trader. And so I don't want to put restrictions on shipping logs. If the logging companies want to sell the logs to China and they want to buy it, my feeling is stay out of their way. If we can have value-added products here that are cost-effective and economical, then our people here can make money doing that.
Well, here's the problem why that is important, because you want to bring the logging industry back.
Yeah.
That includes mills and good-paying jobs. Okay, these
Right.
little towns around here are collapsing because these mills left. Now you're shipping a raw log to China, and that raw log is being turned into lumber and being shipped back to us. Now that's a problem, because you're taking American jobs and you're shipping them overseas.
Okay, let me ask you something. Let me ask you a question. Why is it cost effective to take a raw log, pay for the cost of sending it to China, for them to do something with it, and then pay the cost of shipping it back here? What's the
Chinese are
economics of
overpaying
that?
for it, that's why.
Why?
Because they're overpaying for it.
So this-
They're paying almost twice what the rate it was 5-10 years ago. They're paying way more than what that timber's worth. Because in the depressed housing market, you've never seen timber this high. The price per board foot this high.
Well, it must be worth it to them.
Well, yeah, because they got a booming
So
economy.
that helps our log.
It doesn't help us out at all. It does not. The logging industry is run by a few big companies and a few small jippo outfits.
So what would your solution be?
Ban the raw export of logs.
See, I
Because
don't-
if you
I
keep
don't-
those
I
logs
don't
here,
agree with
you now produce jobs that are $16, $17 an hour.
I don't agree with that at
Well,
all.
it has to do with the
I mean,
currency.
frankly, I don't agree with that at all. I think
Okay.
you have to, if any company makes a product that somebody abroad wants to sell, wants to buy, I say let them sell it. I don't want the government interfering with that. When we did that in the past, it was disastrous. It created trade wars, and trade contracted, and a lot of people lost their jobs.
Yeah,
So,
right.
yeah.
A lot of loggers have lost their jobs
Yeah.
by
Our time's
shipping
up.
them.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I wish it'd been up before you asked me that question.
Hey, thanks for coming.
Okay, thanks a lot.